it's official. Summer's been cancelled this year. G'day friends! Today I'm going to be chatting about how piano lessons taught me to quickly and relatively painlessly learn new skills. If you're brand new to my channel, welcome. If this is not your first rodeo, welcome back. I'm Mare. I'm a crafter, costumer, and all-round creative, and I'm very happy to be participating in CostTube's COVID. Like many other YouTubers with a love of sewing, history, and craft, I'm very thankful to COVID, CostTube Guide, and the CostTubing community for giving us a venue to learn and to connect. If you're collecting COVID badges, please stay tuned to the end of the video for the QR code to redeem my badge. You may be wondering what piano lessons have to do with crafting. It can be boiled down to one essential fact. It's a system of learning that has been refined for centuries to teach a basic set of skills in a relatively short amount of time, progressively increasing in difficulty at a rate best suited to the student. In other words, teach different people the same thing quickly, allowing for short attention spans and abilities. If you do handcrafts of any sort, you've probably had someone look at your knitting or crocheting or hand sewing and say, well, I suppose I could do that if I had that much time on my hands. The insinuation, of course, is that they're so much more busy than you are with your knitted sock or your cross stitch or your full-on Regency wardrobe you happen to have shown up wearing to the Halloween party. Let me reassure you, my friends, that your acquaintance is a jerk. You both have the same amount of hours in every day, 24 when last I checked, and while they were sitting on the sofa watching Floor is Lava, you were, well, probably sitting on the sofa watching Floor is Lava. The difference is that you took the time to learn a skill to the point where you could enjoy both crafting and a dubious example of the art of physical comedy. I'm going to talk about how we can crunch some of that learning time into 15-minute sprints. And next time you see Buffy at the Halloween party, you can cheerfully tell them that not only did you make that fancy millinered hat yourself, you also tatted the lace trim on your jacket, because you just didn't have enough time to stop by the fly-by-night Halloween supply megastore like everyone else. Though, seriously, stop by the megastore and buy that crap on discount. Cheap goth merch has a place in every home. These are samples of notes from a piano lesson. Don't worry if you don't understand it all, that's not really the point. The point is that I understand it because they're directions written in a language my piano teacher has taught me. When you're learning a new craft or a new crafting technique, you need to know the language being used. These could be information from the designer letting you know what kind of yarn or thread to use, what kind of materials and quantity. Do you need needles or hooks or shuttles, and in what sizes? It could also refer to skill-specific techniques and their abbreviations. Can you tell a dart from a gore on a paper pattern? Can you make one left in knitting? Crochet is a singularly frustrating beast as they use the same stitches but give them different names. One country's treble is another's double, or double treble depending on which stitch you need. I can take a look at these directions and know what scales I need to practice and how. I know what musical pieces they want me to concentrate on, and they've outlined any special techniques they want me to follow. If I'm a beginner student, I may also have pages of theory homework assigned. This is my roadmap. So take notes. If you're the sentimental type, keep a notebook. Call it what you like. Notes, Bible, commonplace book, grimoire, it's yours. Staple in your swatches, mark down your needle sizes, write down techniques in terms that you will understand. Keep a list of abbreviations handy. Some folks use Ravelry, some have a scrapbook. I tend to reach for post-it notes first, personally. You do you, boo. By the time I stopped taking lessons, I was practicing upwards of 2 hours per day and taking additional courses in theory. If I'd stayed home for another year or two instead of feeling pressured to go to college, I would have been taking other higher level courses like music history and teaching. As a beginner, I don't expect you to have the stamina to support that kind of deep dive. Chances are pretty good you're thinking, I don't want to learn the entire history of bobbin lace. I just want to put frilly things on my Victorian underwear, and I heard knitting will save me some money. You're not wrong. That's why I'm going to suggest that you practice for a maximum of 15 minutes per session. Though if you think learning knitting is going to save you money, I mean, you've got another think coming. I suspect that if you're watching this, there's something you're really passionate about. Could be costuming, could be crafting, could be hang gliding. At any rate, there's at least one thing in your life at which you are highly skilled. If you feel like sharing, put it down in the comments. I'm curious, and I bet the other people watching the video are too. You probably didn't start out as an expert. You probably started slowly and built up your ability over time. By starting with a chunk of 15 minutes, that's what we're doing. Personally, I find that 5 minutes is too short and 20 is too long. By the time I've hit the 10-minute mark, I've only just managed to get into the groove, and by the 20-minute mark, I'm wondering when the torture will end. 15 minutes is achievable. You can do as many sessions in a day as you want, you just have to commit to focusing on that one technique per session. When I was teaching myself lever knitting on circular needles, I promised myself that I could knit that sock as long as I liked, but for the first 15 minutes I had to commit to only using the lever knitting technique. I could switch back to my old style afterwards if I liked, but I had to lever knit for a minimum of 15 minutes. It became a habit. The moment I picked up my knitting, I automatically started lever knitting, and I just didn't stop. I did the same thing when I was learning how to knit two-handed for stranded knitting, and the same thing yet again when I was teaching myself crochet. 15-minute chunks of time, no interruptions, go. Choose a project that engages you. I found that when I was taking lessons, my teacher could assign me as many Bach inventions as he liked, and they just didn't do much for me. It's a shame, because I really do like Bach, but what really made me happy was Beethoven. Dude was emo as all get out. He was to the classical and romantic period what Rites of Spring and Weezer were to the 1980s and 90s, and he appealed to my little goth heart. So imagine my music teacher's frustration when he's trying to get me interested in the lively piece that shows off all the awesome technical skills he's spent the past year drilling into my brain, and all I want to do is play that damned Moody Sonata all the time. Play your Moody Sonata, folks. If you really want a Doctor Who scarf, go crazy on the Knit Picks website and buy all that yarn, because all the doilies in the world won't satisfy you. Likewise, you can make pillows and pencil cases galore, but if the thing that really turns your crank is a Renaissance gown, then a Renaissance gown you will make. It'll probably take you longer than a pencil case, but at least you won't have to dig through your sewing machine manual trying to figure out how to attach the zipper foot. What's that saying? Those who can't teach? What a load of bull roar. My friends, many of your favorite piano legends also taught. Let me clarify, I'm not talking about Elton John or Tori Amos here. We need to go back a little farther in history. Dude's gotta pay the bills, right? It's not like Geffen was rolling up to Mozart and saying, "Hey buddy, we'll give you your own label if you let us distribute your operas." No, these guys had a very specific set of skills, and sometimes teaching them to others was the difference between starving for your art and just plain starving. The reason why we have a lot of Bach's work isn't just because his job was as a church composer. It's also because he was a teacher and he wrote much of the music that he taught. He also had a lot of kids, and he taught them too, and then they carried on the family tradition. Oh, and they played music too. There are a lot of Bachs. Many other famous composers worked in similar ways. It's not unusual in musical culture to give a kind of family tree of who you learned from. For some folks, it doesn't mean a lot. For others, it's a sign of prestige. I didn't learn how to knit until I was about 30 years old. My grandmother, an enthusiastic knitting hobbyist, tried multiple times to teach me, but it just didn't stick. Part of the problem was the vast difference in skill levels. She had mastered the art while I knew next to nothing. Another problem was vocabulary. She didn't have the patience to teach me the language of knitting. I didn't have a reason to knit. After all, if I needed something, Granny could make it for me, right? So I didn't have a project that I wanted to make. Finally, the tools were, well, they were probably good for their time, but while Granny had all sorts of straight needles, I prefer metal-plated circulars. As you learn, you'll find that there are tools that you work with, and there are tools that work with you. When you find a tool that works with you, it's probably worth the investment. If it's expensive, maybe just get what you need and not jump in with both feet, if you know what I'm saying. I remember being in my early 30s and a friend showed me her new knitting book, Stitch and Bitch, The Knitter's Handbook by Debbie Stoller. There was a hat pattern that featured kitty cat ears or devil's horns, and I wanted one badly enough that I asked my friend if she'd make it for me. Folks, she flat out refused. She then offered to teach me how to knit it myself, to which I laughed and said, if Granny couldn't teach me how to knit, who could? But that hat, folks, I really wanted that hat. So the next time I was at the bookstore, I bought the book, and since Michael's was just around the corner, I bought some cheap acrylic and one of those learn to knit kits with pre-packaged straight needles and notions, and I think I managed 2 inches on a scarf. But reading the book, I learned that you could use more than straight needles. You could use circulars, and I didn't like the feel of the acrylic, so I picked up a ball of Patton's Classic Merino. And once I'd fumbled my way through a knitted iPod case, I deemed myself capable of making the hat, which I made, and it was way too small for me, so I think I gifted it to my baby niece, which started all sorts of weird, crafty, gifty traditions. Don't get me started or we'll be here all day. The long and the short of it is this. Debbie Stoller's book was written in a way that I could understand and learn from. It was a good starting point. I do feel a bit sad that it was Debbie Stoller and not my granny who succeeded in teaching me. Granny had a lot of patterns I could have swiped when she wasn't looking, and I have to buy anything Debbie Stoller puts out. Since then, YouTube has become a huge game changer for anyone who wants to take up a craft or hobby. How many people watching this have been following along with Bernadette Banner, Morgan Donner, Noelle from Costuming Drama, or Marika of Enchanted Rose? How many have taken up vintage clothing and accessorizing from Rachel Maxey or Carolina Zarowska? If you play with yarn, you may know of Marley Bird, Stacy of Very Pink, Roxanne Richardson, or Suzanne Bryan. I'm not just name dropping here. These are all people who are potential guides on your crafting paths. I could give you a similar list of music theorists, arrangers, and essayists on YouTube. Whether it's inspiration or technique, we get something from all these people that speaks to us. As you're looking through the COVID schedule, you're probably going to find a few more, so I definitely encourage you to like their videos and subscribe to their channels so YouTube knows what you want to see. For some things, you can definitely make YouTube your home university, and it doesn't cost an arm and a leg. Whose arm and a leg is up for debate, but you take my point. A pianist rarely sits down, looks at a piece of sheet music, and just starts playing. That's called sight reading, and while it can be done, and with practice, fairly fluently, it's a skill you really have to work on. Similar to the way a person talks in between taking breaths, music follows a set of phrases. Piano teachers will often break a piece down into these phrases so a student can learn them with speed and accuracy. Maybe a Renaissance gown is a bit much right from the starting gates. How about a chemise? Maybe a bum roll? No comments from the peanut gallery. Learn how to break your tasks down into bite-sized chunks. That way, if you're only working in 15-minute sessions to begin with, you don't feel like you dragged out the sewing machine for nothing. While I was learning crochet, I thought I was going to start with granny squares. They're small, right? Small enough that you could probably make an entire granny square in 15 minutes and have a new set of coasters in an hour. I'd be working my way up to doilies in no time flat. Well, as much as Leisurecraft thinks they've written good directions in their 99 Granny Squares book, I somehow got lost. Probably didn't help that I was using leftover sock yarn, because I really hate crafter's cotton, it just hurts my hands. I found myself going through the crochet section of Ravelry, looking through ultra-popular patterns trying to find a project. I came across the virus shawl, and the granny shawl, or granny square shawl, and the granny meets virus shawl. And I think one or more of these patterns is now gone because apparently someone borrowed very heavily from one or more of the patterns without permission and, well, can open worms everywhere. Some of the nicer looking examples were crocheted out of Red Heart Unforgettable. Yes, Red Heart, the brand that for years was synonymous with squeaky plastic yarn. Red Heart's doing good things with inexpensive yarn these days, and if it's what you got, you use it. Unforgettable has a kind of mohair texture that, if you know what you're doing, can make a delightful shawl. If you don't know what you're doing, it can make a delightful mess. Either way, it's less expensive to learn with than, say, $50 worth of premium hand-dyed yarn. And I mean, there's a time and a place for hand-dyed yarn. I'm just saying that maybe learning how to crochet a shawl isn't it. Maybe it is if you live for the good stuff. Me, I've learned that I enjoy yarn that changes color just often enough to be attractively entertaining, but not so often as to look like a clown was murdered on my sofa. The other bonus to the virus granny shawl thing, I found a video on YouTube of someone demonstrating how to crochet the shawl. This is how I learned that I can figure out what I'm doing if I have a clear look at someone's hands. Kind of the same way I learned Eye of the Tiger back in 1986 until my piano teacher realized I was playing in entirely the wrong key for the sheet music and had me relearn the entire piece. Remember, you can learn a lot from watching someone else. You can also learn all their bad habits. The upshot to this is that I learned how to crochet the shawl by using resources I had readily available. Affordable yarn, inexpensive hooks. If the pattern was a bit unclear, the video I watched showed me the way I needed to work it, and it wasn't so difficult I couldn't put it down if I needed to. I could work on it for, say, 15 minutes, then go feed the cat, or take a phone call. Fast forward to a few months ago. There was a sculptural blanket I decided that I wanted to crochet, and it's huge. And by huge, I mean that it's big. The digital download PDF isn't just a pattern, it's a whole bloody book. It had the things that I was looking for, could be done with inexpensive yarn, used hooks I already owned, and for an extra couple of loonies and toonies, you could purchase access to the line-by-line instructional videos. So worth it. I'm at a point where each row takes between 5 minutes and 15 minutes to complete. That's enough time to learn the technique that round is sneakily trying to teach me. If I don't have enough yarn to finish this blanket, I can get more and not worry about mismatched dye lots. That's a lesson that fabric users learn as well. Note your dye lots. Jot that down in your grimoire and you'll thank me for that later. Best of all, I can work on it slowly and there are clear instructions with a demonstration if I get lost. Am I a master knitter? I doubt it. Well, I don't have the certification, but I can figure out most things if I have clear enough directions. I'm nowhere near that level with crochet or sewing, but I have interest and enthusiasm, and I've figured out how to learn the basics. I'm not afraid to chart something if I need to or call my mum. Having a firm grasp of the basics seems to be the key to learning a skill. And giving yourself the best circumstances to learn is a gift you give yourself. Every time I need to learn a new crafting technique, I go back to the lessons I learned from my piano teachers. I set a specific goal that I know I can achieve in a reasonable amount of time, consult my instructions, whether written or video, and then I set my watch or find a suitably entertaining YouTube video and practice. Audiobooks are also good if you're doing something that doesn't need your full concentration. In fact, as you get more proficient, you'll find that you need to pay less and less attention to the craft you're trying to learn. This is how you can see all the things on that streaming service the kids are talking about while you're making your very own Worth gown. Maybe listen to Jasmine and Gigi of the Knit More Girls podcast talk about their upcoming book Operation Sock Drawer. And all you need to do is ask the family for 15 minutes of quiet. Maybe tell them to go play in the backyard for a bit. Remind your significant other that you'll need someone to lace you into that corset you're making. Either way, it sounds like a win to me. Thank you so much for keeping me company while I rambled on about teaching myself new skills. I hope you found something useful in between my sarcastic mutterings. If you're collecting QR codes for COVID badges, my code will flash up on the screen momentarily. The alphanumeric code for my visually impaired viewers is 6Q000D. That's 6 Quebec Oscar 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 Delta, or 6 quarks meet an odd ood. Science fiction junkies will understand that last one. Please remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and feel free to leave a comment down below. If you want to be notified when I release new content, the bell's your buddy. I hope you have a fun COVID, and I'll catch you all later. Till then.